This is Trend Following Radio, where great thinking comes alive. Nobel Prize winners, legendary traders, best-selling authors, and the pros that know what drive us irrational human beings. I am your host, Michael Covel. Not filtered, raw, honest. That's my passion. I did watch the Trump first debate, or I watched pieces of it. And as someone who grew up in the Washington, D.C. area, watching politics very closely, I guess this was my burden, my cross to bear. I sure don't watch as closely today by any stretch of the imagination because I'm one that firmly believes elections have little matter today. But I watched the Trump debate. And there was no doubt in my mind, and I think for a lot of people, he scored some points. He did things and said things in a way that caused anyone with just the slightest bit of memory to say, wow, I don't recall politicians talking like that before. And that alone is worth something. So I clicked in and out, and I caught the very end. And right at the end, they sent it to a polling station, or a room full of people being polled by pollster Frank Luntz, the guy with the red hair, that rug that he wears on top of his head. I don't know. Frank Luntz seems like a fairly likable guy. He seems kind of scientific when you listen to him. He seems like he's this unbiased character, even though he generally works for conservative candidates. He asked this initial question, and I don't recall his exact phrasing, but it was essentially, who liked Trump? And there's a room full of like 25 to 30 Republican Ohio voters. And Luntz asked them, who liked Trump before the debate? And basically all the hands went up that they liked Trump before the debate. At the end of the debate, he asked, do you like Trump now? Or something to that effect. I don't recall his exact phrasing, but it was, do you like Trump now? Literally, I think one hand went up. So everyone that watched that debate, the quote, Republican voters from Ohio being polled by Frank Luntz, were in uniform agreement that Trump bombed. They now hated Trump. One debate later, they hated Trump. I went ahead and went to the Drudge Report. And the Drudge Report had a poll up asking people, who do you think won the debate? Trump was like at 40%. And I think it got up to like 50%. And that was kind of how I felt. I felt like the guy made some points. This has nothing to do with politics, what I'm talking about right now. This has to do with the use and misuse of statistics. Because basically anybody can make any point they want, depending on how they use or misuse stats. Ultimately, that's my point with Frank Luntz. Perhaps Drudge was doing the same thing. I decided to dig a little deeper on this character, Frank Luntz. I found a great video from one of my favorite skeptics, Penn Jillette of Penn & Teller fame. But consider Penn & Teller's investigative report into Frank Luntz and his polling methods.
The key in survey research is to ask questions that people care about the answers, and to ask a question in a way that you get the right answer.
The right answer? So who gets to decide what is the right answer? The pollster.
What you will find is that to virtually the same question with just a single change of wording, you'll get a very different reaction in terms of how they think and how they feel.
Luntz hit the streets of Santa Monica to hit on old ladies. Demonstrate his, Jesus Christ, this is really fucked up point. Watch how he got this man to give two different answers about government spending on illegal immigrants.
Does the federal government spend too much or too little on social programs for illegal immigrants in this country?
I think they spend too much on illegal programs for immigrants.
Would you deny emergency room care to an illegal immigrant?
No, I wouldn't.
Would you deny the children of illegal immigrants the ability to attend a public school here?
No, I wouldn't.
So you'd spend money on education for them, and you'd spend money on health care for them, but you think we're spending too much money on them?
Yeah, I do.
See? He got the answer he wanted, which means he can get the numbers he wants and can act like it's true and scientific. But don't worry, we can play that game.
Most people don't regard what I do as manipulation because it's based on science. But there is a little bit of art to it.
More than a little, Matisse. Let's play along. Approximately 10 cars drive by during this clip.
Hey, Luntz, you're an idiot!
And one thinks Luntz is an idiot. So by our poll, 10% of the world's population thinks Frank Luntz is an idiot. If you include me and Teller, that's 110%.
I use survey research to make the point that the American people don't understand these issues, can't understand the complexities, and in the end, my questions are really designed for a USA Today audience. People who want their news in snippets.
Polling is bullshit and never useful. What the fuck do you care what people think? You should care only about information and right and wrong. Even if 100% of the people polled like fucking Hobbit movies, they still suck. Polling is in fact, and yet every day on the TV news and in the paper, you hear some poll quoted as if it contains truth. Join us in a brave experiment. Every time you see a poll of any kind, try to remember Frank. Don't picture numbers. The numbers don't mean anything. Picture Frank, fucking Frank, jerking you around for a shitload of money. Or better yet, yell out, "Fuck you, Frank!" We talked to a lot of people and asked them if they would yell out, "Fuck you, Frank," every time they saw a poll. And 24% said they would.
Fuck you, Frank!
That sets the tone for where I want to go today. Be a skeptic. Think skeptically. Don't just trust the system to spoon feed you jargon and sound bites and little pieces of information that sound good and make you feel good. And it's all just nonsensical, engineered information to get a certain point of view across. And damn well, you might have that same view about me right now, but you're always welcome to go verify. On a recent podcast episode, I excerpted a clip from Leda Braga. Today, I want to add more from that same interview. I actually found the long-form interview. This first clip from her, and she is probably the most successful trend-following woman on the planet today. This first clip, she talks about forecasting versus risk management. The fundamental way of trading is all about forecasting. The trend-following way, the systematic way, it's all about risk management. Consider her wisdom.
The systematic approach shifts the emphasis from the forecasting to the risk management. And that is very powerful about it, right? Because that enables you to be contrarian. So, you look at 2014, we all had good years on the CTA side, partly because we were long fixed income. And, who was the discretionary trader that would have been keen on being long fixed income in 2014 when the whole world thought that rates were only going one way? That's right.
Jeff got lucked.
And so you think, so we were able to be contrarian. And you ask yourself, well, why does the investor let me? I don't know. The discretionary guy, big portfolio manager, walks up to the I'm long fixed income. I don't know that the investor is going to appreciate that in 2014, and yet they let us do it. So why do they let us do it? Because as a package, we work. So if you deploy the objective thinking all through your portfolio and in a diversified way and in a disciplined way, then you've got a license to be long fixed income in 2014. And occasionally that works. It's a contrarian view, but that works. And so that's my reflection on it, the shift between the forecasting to the risk management.
In this next excerpt, she talks about the critique of trend following and systematic trading as black box. But she says quite clearly, there are some extreme advantages to systematic trading, to trend-following trading, to using rules automated in a computer. Even if us human beings don't want to trust the computer, even if us human beings want to throw out the pejorative when we hear about an automated trading strategy and just scream black box. I mean, it's literally, and I've talked about this in my podcast before, there are people that hear about systematic trading, they hear about trend following, and they just scream black box. Like somehow or another, by saying black box, they literally think they have answered the questions. They have refuted the debate. They have won the conversation. Here is more from Leda Braga.
Well, quants also have a history of protecting their algorithms, protecting their computer models, which makes sense. But, for investors, the black box, they might call it, has been a bit of a turnoff because they can't really understand what's inside the black box. I mean, is that something that you're seeing that the boxes are becoming maybe a little bit more transparent? Or?
I know. I'm on a mission to turn that into the white box. Turn the black box into the white box. I think it's unfair. I think, because we have to protect the IP, we don't go off disclosing the details of the algorithms that we run. But the parameters, the thesis, the principles behind the algorithms are better articulated than in any other sector of the industry. So, if anything, we are more auditable than the discretionary guy. The discretionary guy will tell you his process, but, is there any guarantee that tomorrow he will adopt that process? You kind of hope so, but you can't really know. With the algorithmic trading approach, we explicitly articulate the models to the extent that, for example, in Systematica now, the risk team has been very busy interacting with the researchers to develop what they call the dynamic scenario tools. And so traditionally risk teams will do scenario analysis, right? So they'll look at your positions, the portfolio positions that you've got right now, and they'll apply some moves to those positions. So they say, well, on the day of the Lehman bankruptcy announcement, this is what the markets did. Let me see what your positions would have made or lost if you went through those market moves. Well, one thing that we can do, if you are a systematic shop, you're not limited to one move. If you care to tell me what the market did over a long period of time, I can tell you how the model would have performed, which is something that you can't really do with a discretionary trader, right? I mean, the guy might just not want to cut, or might deviate from his usual process, or might read the wrong piece of news and make the wrong decision. Whereas with us, the process is fully described in the algorithm, right? So a dynamic scenario tool shows you how that trader, that algorithm, will actually trade through that path of the markets. And it's a very powerful thing. Mm-hmm. And so, I think the risk controls are very strong. And if anything, as I say, I think it's unfair to call us we're the white box, not the black box.
All right. Well, you were recently quoted as saying that systematic trading will dominate the way people invest in the future. Obviously you do believe that. Why do you believe that? And how close are we actually to experiencing that future?
Good question. No, I believe in that because, think about the world that we live in, right? Nobody makes one business decision without doing some data analytics. The data is captured everywhere. That's the way things are going. You want to get a cab, you go to Uber, and you don't even look for the car. You look at your screen to see where the car is, right? So I do think that in a world where there's regulatory pressure for more auditability, there's investor pressure for lower fees, I think that the systematic approach will probably prevail in the long run. And I think, the time scale for that, it's anybody's guess, but I would think the next 10 years for sure. And I think that the stumbling block, we were talking about that earlier, weren't we? The stumbling block is this, the algorithm aversion, right? We as human beings have got to try to be a bit more rational about evaluating what the algorithms do for us. And there's quite a lot of studies in the academic world about how we all prefer a human being to do the job for us, even if we know the human being will do a worse job. So I was reading this Harvard Business Review paper. It's a February paper, so it's a recent paper. And it talks about why we just don't go with the algorithms. And it talks about experiments that they have run where, you can use algorithms for all sorts of predictions. You can use algorithms for scoring students for admission in a university. We heard in the news not long ago that one of the banks uses algorithms for compliance screening. So they try to detect patterns of behavior in their staff to see which members of staff should be more closely monitored by compliance. So, we know that these techniques work, and yet we shy away from them, and we scrutinize the algorithms, with a lot less tolerance than we scrutinize human actions. I think that is really the stumbling block, and I think the passage of time and as I say, the fact that you call your Uber cab and you don't even look for him, you look at your screen to see where he is. I think over time people will become more amenable to it and will adopt it more readily.
I find the black box critique goes right alongside the survivorship bias critique. For whatever reason, when trend following strategies are brought forth, put on the table, there's like this random guy that sits in the back corner of the room that doesn't know what the fuck he's talking about. And he just raises his hand and he says, "What about survivorship bias? You've picked the lucky winner. There were a million other trend following traders that all failed, so the one that you've picked is lucky and he's probably going to blow up tomorrow." I just don't understand that type of thinking. I mean, I do understand it. It's generally an agenda. Take, for example, the turtle trading story. At least a half dozen of the original students taught by Richard Dennis and Bill Eckhart have had decades-long success stories. Now, on the flip side, you can go out and you can find horror stories about one or two of those turtle traders. Now, you might say, "But Michael, you've picked the trend-following turtle trading winners. What about these one or two turtles over here that failed?" I guess that's a fair point. But shouldn't you want to look at why they failed? Instead of just assuming that some of them failed because they were just on the variance of the distribution, they just fell outside and they did everything the same as everyone else that were the winners, but they just failed. No fault of their own, they just failed. It sure seems like to me that when you dig in to why certain trading strategies fail, to why there might be losers in a certain population of a certain style of trading, there's reasons. Sure, I'm not saying survivorship bias is not an issue. But if you think you can just say survivorship bias, therefore, it's all excluded, it was all irrelevant, it was all luck, you're welcome to take that position. Getting back on track, I want to go back to some of Leda Braga's points. She made some great points about black box, about discretion, about systems, about preferring a human, even if the human does a worse job than the machine. There are people out there that want that. They want the human being, even if the human being is a clod. So what is the fear? What is the fear that people have about computers, about automation, about systems? One of my favorite philosophers is Daniel Dennett. I've spoken about him on this podcast before. One of his great books is Intuition Pumps and Other Tools for Thinking. I want to read a few of his excerpts about computing, the historical legacy, and what's behind computing. From Daniel Dennett. Perhaps the most wonderful feature of computers is that because they are built up by simple steps out of parts, operations, that are also dead simple, there's simply no room for them to have any secrets up their sleeve. No ectoplasm, no morphic resonances, no invisible force fields, no unknown physical laws, no wonder tissue. You know that if you succeed in getting a computer program to model some phenomena, there are no causes at work in the model other than the causes that are composed of all of the operations. End quote. If I put that in trend following context, that means trend following is nothing more than rules that you can write down on a piece of paper. Little formulas, simple. And then you simply transfer those rules to a computer program. The computer program is not thinking, it's acting on what you tell it to do. And it will do the same thing with rigid consistency all of the time. Continuing from Daniel Dennett. The idea that an algorithm is a foolproof and somehow mechanical procedure has been present for centuries, but it was the pioneering work of Alan Turing, Kurt Gödel, and Alonzo Church in the 1930s that more or less fixed our current understanding of the term. 3 key features of algorithms will be important to us, and each is somewhat difficult to define. Number 1, substrate neutrality. The procedure for long division works equally well with pencil or paper or parchment, neon lights or skywriting, using any symbol system you like. The power of the procedure is due to its logical structure, not the causal powers of the materials used, just so long as those causal powers permit the prescribed steps to be followed exactly. Number 2, underlying mindlessness. Although the overall design of the procedure may be brilliant or yield brilliant results, each constituent step and the transition between steps is utterly simple. How simple? Simple enough for a dutiful idiot or for a straightforward mechanical device to perform. The standard textbook analogy notes that algorithms are recipes of sorts, designed to be followed by novice cooks. A recipe book written for great chefs might include the phrase, poach the fish in a suitable wine until almost done. But an algorithm for the same process might begin, quote, choose a white wine that says dry on the label. Take a corkscrew and open the bottle. Pour an inch of wine in the bottom of a pan. Turn the burner under the pan on high, end quote. That's a tedious breakdown of the process into dead simple steps, requiring no wise decisions or delicate judgments or intuitions on the part of the recipe reader. Number 3, guaranteed results. Whatever it is that an algorithm does, it always does it, if it's executed without misstep. An algorithm is a foolproof recipe. It is easy to see how these features made the computer possible. Every computer program is an algorithm ultimately composed of simple steps that can be executed with stupendous reliability by one simple mechanism or another, end quote. One last fabulous explanation about computing from Daniel Dennett. It was Turing who figured out how you could get the idea to think themselves. You write down a recipe for how to do some thinking and give it to a mathematician. He follows the recipe, does the thinking. Turing says, yeah, but you can leave the mathematician out of it. You can just give the recipe to the machine and eliminate the middleman. Eliminate the middleman and the thinking just happens. Turing shows that if a computer can add, subtract, multiply, and divide, and if it can tell the difference between 0 and 1, it can do anything. You can take that set of mindless abilities and build them up into structures of indefinite discriminative power, indefinite discerning power, indefinite reflective power. You can make a whole mind. You can solve Hume's problem. You can get ideas to think for themselves on this slender base. That's the idea of an algorithm. End quote. I love the way Dennett thinks. He takes all that jargon, he takes all that fear that we have about jargon when it comes to computing and when it comes to automation, and he breaks it down to something caveman-like. Of course, he has quite the eloquence with his wording, and he is a brilliant mind. But the way he breaks things down is straightforward. It's sticks and stones. It's pen and paper. What he really does is offer the foundation for why there might be any trend following or any systematic success. It starts with the idea. It's the thinking first. First, you have to have an idea. You just don't sit down and data mine. There has to be an economic foundation, something behind why this particular procedure, this particular group of rules works. Lasse Peterson on my podcast recently discussing his newest book. Lasse is of AQR. AQR has some fantastic writing and research out about trend following. Building on the idea that ideas are number one. I want to read an excerpt from Lasse's work, an excerpt where he is going back and forth with David Harding of Winton Capital. David Harding of Winton Capital, who started a trend following firm in the late 1990s with $5 million under management, and today is somewhere around $30 billion under management. And I know there's probably going to be all kinds of reasons that some people might have about why Harding has that success. He was a smart guy. He kept plugging away. He stuck with it. He had determination. And he also had big balls. Cojones has something to do with this all. First, the question from Lassa. You've said that trend following is an agnostic form of investment. Can you explain what you mean? David Harding. Yes, trend following contains many less embedded assumptions than other types of investments. We don't take a view on what's going to happen next year and the year after and the year after. We don't take a view on whether China's going to boom or bust. For example, we don't take a view on whether there's going to be an ongoing scarcity of commodities. There are people very busily setting up their portfolios with the absolute certainty that there's going to be a terrific scarcity of commodities over the next 10 or 20 years. Because it's so obvious to them that, the number of people is increasing, blah, blah, blah. But they weren't doing that 10 years ago. In other words, they do it after prices have already risen for 10 years. I'd have a lot of respect for them if they'd done it before prices had risen for 10 years. That is a rather weak form of trend following. It's trend following by accident. The questioning from Lassa continues. So how do your models exploit that markets are not perfectly efficient? David Harding. Markets are social institutions and reflect all sorts of phenomena that you'd expect social institutions to reflect. They reflect certain things about the price formation process, and one of those is obviously the tendency of markets to serially correlate because ideas catch on slowly and spread, and fevers develop, and people get over-optimistic and become disappointed. Question. Are there some circumstances or events that illustrate the value of managed futures, of trend following? David Harding responds, we tend to make money out of surprises, and people are very bad at foreseeing surprises. If you just look at history of the last 100 years, the First World War came out of clear blue sky. Talk about the efficient market theory. Bond yields and stock prices didn't move on July 5th, 1914, or July 23rd, 1914, despite the assassination of Franz Ferdinand a month before. They had no idea what was going to come. So the market didn't efficiently discount the First World War. Then we had the Communist Revolution in Russia. Efficient market theory didn't get that. Same with the Second World War. Hitler, the arms race, the invention of computers. It's just been one thing after another in terms of completely surprising the markets. And I'm not even touching on the last 20 years, the collapse of the banking system, and so on. Question. So how does trend following benefit from surprises? David Harding. There are obviously large surprises in human history, continually, but there are also small surprises which affect one market. Question. But for an investor to benefit from a surprise, it cannot be a complete surprise. It would have to show up in prices before it happened. That is, it would have to unfold gradually. David Harding. Well, I guess you're right. Luckily, most surprises do unfold gradually. To preserve the ridiculous idea of efficient market theory, all surprises would have to be instantaneously discounted, but this is just not possible. The collapse of the banking system unfolded with a sickening series of events over time, so the stock market fell by 50% over the space of a year, and trend-following systems worked well, end quote. I look at the skepticism that Frank Luntz brings about in Penn and Teller, where Penn Jillette is just like, fuck you, Frank. I look at that skepticism. I look at how Leda Braga thinks. How does she think? How does she express herself? What is she driving at? What is the point? What is the expertise that she has developed? What does she see that so many other people don't see? I look at how Daniel Dennett pulls the curtain back on jargon, pulls the curtain back on something that for many people still in 2015 causes much internal strife. Oh my gosh, a computer. Oh my gosh, automating. And I look at how David Harding describes his thought process. because it connects right back to Penn and Teller. It connects right back to Leda Braga. It connects right back to Daniel Dennett. All of those individuals, skeptics, all of those individuals looking deeper at the use of numbers, deeper at the use of statistics. You want to be a contrarian. You want to be on the other side of the coin. Don't be with everyone. Stand to the side. That's where the opportunity is. I see a time when those awake will understand how to make money in up, down, and surprise markets. Whether new trader or experienced, college student or financial advisor, protecting against a crash or just trying to make a lot of money, trend following offers everyone an answer in uncertain times. To get started immediately, send me an email, michael@covel.com. I will send you the right trend following steps to take along with my free video. But if you want to buy and hold, trust the government and trust Wall Street, this is absolutely not for you.